In the late summer of 1781, in a secluded plantation district of Raven County, Virginia, 9-year-old Rebecca Hollins became the center of a case later recorded in both parish and county documents as one of the most anomalous occurrences of its decade. The Hollins estate lay several miles inland from the North Anna River, surrounded by uneven tracts of pine, black gum, and tobacco plots that had been under cultivation for less than 20 years. The main house, constructed from rough-hewn oak timbers, stood on elevated ground overlooking a bend of the road leading toward the smaller settlement of Westmore. At the time, the plantation was the property of Elias and Margaret Hollins, who maintained a modest number of enslaved individuals, including the girl Rebecca, who had been born on the property in 1772 to a woman named Sarah. Records preserved from the diocesan correspondence indicate that Rebecca was of quiet temperament, prone to long periods of silence, and seldom known to disobey. Her mother, described as of frail constitution, worked primarily within the kitchen quarters until her death from fever in the spring of 1779. Afterward, Rebecca was assigned intermittent duties in the main household, chiefly to assist with sweeping, fetching water, and tending to Margaret Hollins's spinning room. Parish baptismal ledgers from that period make no mention of the child, though a marginal note added by the Reverend Nathaniel Green in 1780 refers to a small girl of sable complexion in the Hollins service who exhibits no knowledge of the catechism. The earliest surviving description of the events comes from Reverend Green's own records, preserved among the diocesan manuscripts now catalogued as File 12B, Unverified Accounts, Raven Parish. In his first memorandum dated August 11, 1781, Green wrote that he had been called to the Hollins property at the request of Mistress Hollins, who had taken sudden alarm at a series of nocturnal disturbances attributed to the servants' quarters. The clergyman's entry noted that upon arrival he found the household in a state of visible agitation, with several enslaved adults refusing to remain indoors after dusk. Green's report made no mention of violence or visible damage, only that unexplained noises resembling distant voices were said to proceed from the child's sleeping place. At that time, the girls slept alone in a small loft adjoining the main kitchen, accessible by a narrow ladder. According to the testimony of another servant, the woman known as Clarice, the sounds began as a kind of murmuring late at night, as of two persons talking close by, though none were there. When questioned, Rebecca denied hearing anything, though her manner was reported as distracted and vacant. Reverend Green recorded that her speech was deliberate, slow, and absent of proper deference, which he attributed to fatigue or confusion. Within a fortnight, according to his later addendum, the disturbances intensified. Margaret Hollins's letters to her sister, Mrs. Andre, surviving in partial form, corroborate this. One passage dated August 19 reads, "There is a strange fear among the Negroes, they claim the girl speaks to persons unseen. Elias says it is foolishness, yet the sound has reached his ears also, like a whispering through the boards." Another letter, dated 2 days later, was written in evident agitation. The child has taken to answering them now, as if in argument. Last night the cook refused to stay. Elias went himself to look and found nothing, only that the air was very cold and smelled of wet stone. Subsequent records indicate that the temperature noted that evening was unusually low for the season, the Reverend having remarked in his parish diary that the wind had shifted northeast and that a dense vapor lay across the fields at daybreak. It was in this context that the child's condition was first described as distemper of the spirit, a term used within parish records to denote cases of mental derangement or supposed possession. Green's memorandum of August 23 records his first attempt at examination. The girl sat motionless upon the hearth and made no acknowledgment when addressed. Her eyes were open and fixed. When pressed to answer, she began to utter certain syllables not conforming to English or to any African dialect known to the older servants. The speech was slow, distinct, and appeared repeated from elsewhere, as if imitated. Witness statements later gathered by the county sheriff, Thomas Bell, confirmed that the girl continued in this manner for nearly an hour, after which she became still and unresponsive. Green concluded his entry with the words, "It is not known what passes through her at such times, but her pulse remains steady." 2 nights afterward, on August 25, the first fatality associated with the disturbances occurred. Elias Hollins's overseer, Matthew Clegg, was found dead near the tobacco drying shed, his neck broken and his face partially obscured by soil, as though dragged several feet. County Coroner's Inquest Notes, preserved in the Raven County Ledger, Book 2, page 74, state that no marks of struggle were observed other than the injury to the neck. The witnesses present, among them Elias Hollins himself, testified that they had heard a loud report as of timber splitting shortly before finding the body. No connection was initially made between Clegg's death and the child. However, a later notation in the same volume, entered months afterward by a clerk named Joseph Adair, adds the remark, "It was afterward recollected that the girl Rebecca was seen near the shed earlier that evening, though none observed her carrying any tool or implement." Reverend Green, upon revisiting the Hollins property that week, noted that the household is under deep suspicion and fear, many claiming the presence of an unnatural influence. The girl has been confined to her quarters. At this stage, the Reverend began keeping more systematic notes, apparently intending to send a full account to his superior in Richmond. His second memorandum, dated September 2, 1781, begins with a formal preamble indicating his awareness that the matter might draw scrutiny. "It is my duty to record the circumstances as observed without prejudice, though many speak of witchery or the return of the dead. Such things are not to be credited without proof." He then describes in careful terms the setting of the child's confinement, a small upper room adjoining the kitchen loft, with one window nailed shut and a single blanket upon a straw mat. Green observed her there twice that week and reported her demeanor as calm but distant. What disturbed him, according to his own account, was the change in her voice. "The tone has altered beyond the natural pitch of a child, it carries a flatness, like words repeated from memory." By the middle of September, the Reverend's notes mention further incidents, the extinguishing of fires overnight despite full embers at dusk, the repeated falling of utensils from shelves without visible cause, and the departure of 2 servants who refused to remain. One of these, a man named Jonas, left a brief signed declaration, recorded by Sheriff Bell, "The child do call by my name when I am out of sight and speak it in my mother's voice." Though most dismissed this as superstition, Green found the account troubling enough to conduct what he termed a test of utterance. In the margin of his journal he wrote, "I read from the Gospel of St. Luke, chapter 4. When I came to verse 33, and in the synagogue there was a man, which had a spirit of an unclean devil, the child turned her face and recited the same words before I had spoken them." He did not interpret this as proof of possession, noting only that she might have overheard his previous readings. Still, his tone in later entries suggests growing unease. In the first week of October, Margaret Hollins fell ill with what the physician, Dr. Hiram Letcher, described as fever of unknown origin. Letcher's notes, included among his retained casebooks, record temperature irregularities and prolonged delirium, during which the patient repeatedly spoke the child's name. Her death occurred on the 14th of October. The household account book, still in Elias Hollins's hand, records a payment of $2s. To parish grave man for interring my wife. Following the burial, the Reverend Green wrote that Elias became withdrawn and refused further parish visits. The remaining servants reported that he rarely left his room and kept the shutters closed. The child was by then housed separately in the old smokehouse, which stood some 40 yards behind the main dwelling. Green's entry of October 20th notes, "The place has an odor of salt and ash. She sits against the wall and looks toward the door as if expecting someone." 2 days later, the Reverend was summoned urgently by a neighbor, Mr. Calvin Dewar, whose property adjoined the Hollins tract. Dewar reported seeing a figure of small stature walking the fence line at dawn, though no child could have passed the marsh in such mist. When the Reverend arrived, accompanied by Sheriff Bell, they found the smokehouse door open and the mat empty. No sign of forced entry was visible. Search parties followed prints down toward the river bend but lost them near the reed beds. That same evening, however, Rebecca was discovered inside the main house, standing at the foot of the stairs. According to Bell's written report, she was barefoot, her clothing dry despite the rain, and her hands coated with a fine dark residue resembling ash. Elias Hollins reportedly exclaimed that she had been locked away. The Reverend led her into the kitchen and questioned her, but she made no reply. When ordered to sit, she did so immediately and remained silent for the remainder of the night. Green's diary entry for October 24th gives one of the most detailed descriptions. She is altered beyond likeness, her complexion pale as if drained. When the fire is stirred, the reflection does not seem to catch her features evenly. The servants refused to remain in the room. I have prayed over her without effect. The Reverend remained in the house that night and wrote that the air grew heavy toward midnight. He heard what he termed a sound of low moaning not proceeding from the girl. At approximately the same hour, the stable collapsed, killing one horse. The following morning, he departed for the parish office, stating in his memorandum, "It is not fit to remain there alone, the house holds a darkness not of this world." What followed is reconstructed primarily from later testimonies gathered after the war, when the parish attempted to settle property claims following Elias Hollins's death. A document titled Deposition of Calvin Dewar, January 1783 states, "After the woman Hollins was buried, there was no peace in that place. The master grew strange and fearful. The child was seen less and less, and when she did appear, her step made no sound upon the boards." Another, unsigned note preserved among the sheriff's papers adds, "Old Elias said he heard his wife call him in the night, but it was the child's voice." Reverend Green's surviving correspondence ends abruptly in early November 1781. His last letter to the diocesan registrar contains the following line, "If I should not return to complete the report, let it be known that I sought only to restore peace among these afflicted souls." His subsequent disappearance was noted in county archives. A search was undertaken without result. The parish records show his replacement by Reverend Thomas Parr in May of the following year. Later county registers described the Hollins estate as abandoned and fallen to disrepair. The inventory taken by the magistrate in 1784 lists 1 ruined dwelling, 1 barn burned, 2 outbuildings collapsed, and all Negroes sold or fled. No mention of Rebecca appears among the recorded sales or manumissions. The last direct reference to her is a marginal note in Sheriff Bell's ledger: child presumed deceased, no burial entry found. Nevertheless, several correspondences from neighboring residents suggest otherwise. In one letter dated July 1785, addressed to the county surveyor, a man named Francis Boyle wrote, "When I crossed the old Hollands land I saw a little figure sitting by the well, very straight, with hands in her lap. I called out but it made no answer. I thought it might be one of Durer's children until it turned and I saw that its eyes were white as chalk." In the winter of 1785, the abandoned Hollands property remained a matter of curiosity among the parishioners of Raven County. The buildings, by then partially reclaimed by vines and undergrowth, stood unoccupied except for occasional trespassers seeking shelter. The Reverend Thomas Parr, who had assumed charge of the parish in the previous spring, made mention of the estate several times in his correspondence to the diocesan registrar. His first observation, dated February 2, 1785, reads, "The place called Holland stands as when last the former minister departed. The roof of the house is caved, the shutters broken, and the well half filled with debris. There are stories that a child yet lingers, though no evidence of habitation can be seen. Local field hands traveling between farms by way of the Old North Road reported faint smoke near the property on cold nights." Parr visited once, accompanied by the parish sexton, and found the hearth still warm though no living person appeared within. He described the air as sharp and mineral, as if from a vault. In his written account he included a marginal note: "There were impressions in the dust, bare feet of small size, none leading outward." Later that spring, several complaints reached the parish from the neighboring Dewar and Carter families regarding the disappearance of livestock. A county ledger entry of May 4, 1785, records the deaths of 2 sheep and 1 goat found, drained of blood, no wounds visible. The investigating constable, Andrew Miles, attributed this to wild animals or disease, though he appended that the carcasses were arranged in a row facing east. Witnesses, among them the Dewar boy, claimed to have seen a child's shape moving near the old well, though the constable dismissed it. His final note: "Locals much given to fancy regarding that property." It was not until the summer of 1786 that the case again drew official notice. A traveling physician from Richmond, Dr. Erasmus Pike, while lodging in Westmore, heard reports of the abandoned estate and expressed interest. He wrote to a colleague in Williamsburg on August 9, "There is here talk of a deranged child or phantom that walks by the old Hollands place. I intend to examine the grounds and obtain any records left by the former clergyman, if such exist." Pike's journals, preserved in fragmentary condition, provide some of the most direct observations following the presumed events of 1781. On August 15, Pike visited the Hollands tract in the company of a young servant and carried with him a notebook, lantern, and small medical kit. His surviving notes, written in a small, even hand, begin without commentary: "House vacant. Entry through south door. Odor of decay. 1 chair intact by the fireplace. Remains of paper scattered on floor, mostly illegible, though one bears traces of a minister's seal." In a subsequent paragraph he added, "At approximately 8 o'clock, faint sound of movement from upper floor. Boards creak evenly, as of pacing. Lantern light fails to reveal cause. Footprints in dust, bare, small. Pike's servant, later identified as Joseph Tanner, testified that his master remained inside the house for nearly an hour and returned pale but uninjured. In his own statement given before the county magistrate that autumn, Tanner said, "The doctor did call me by name, but his voice was like from a great distance, and when he came forth, he looked as though he had lost blood." Pike, upon returning to Westmore, confined himself to bed for several days. His notes from that period are incoherent in places but contain the recurring phrase, "the repetition of the name, the repetition of the name." In a more legible entry dated August 20th, he described a dream or waking vision. A child seated by the well, hair in disorder, face indistinct. When I spoke, it raised its hand, and from the palm came a shadow like smoke. The air grew cold. I woke in sweat. There is no indication that Pike revisited the site after that date. He left Raven County soon afterward, and his correspondence with his Williamsburg colleague ceased abruptly that year. By 1787, the Hollins estate had become locally synonymous with ill fortune. Tenants who attempted to cultivate the fields reported blighted crops, and several withdrew before harvest. A county revenue document for that year lists the tract as unproductive and derelict. The surrounding families discouraged their children from approaching the area, though occasional sightings persisted. One report from April of that year, given by a boy named Ephraim Durr, states, "We saw her at the well, her hands in her lap, and she turned when the wind moved, but her eyes had no color." Reverend Parr, cautious of local superstition, attempted to suppress further rumors. In his diary entry of June 1, 1787, he wrote, "There is too much talk of spirits. The dead are with God. The Hollins property is a ruin, nothing more." Yet only weeks later, he recorded a curious occurrence within his own rectory. At the hour of matins, a child's voice recited the opening of the Lord's Prayer though none were present. The candles went out together. He concluded with the words, "This may be my imagination, yet I shall take care to record it." Around the same period, an inventory of old parish materials undertaken by the sexton uncovered a packet of papers belonging to the late Reverend Nathaniel Green. These consisted of several letters addressed but never sent to the diocesan registrar, as well as a bound notebook titled Observations upon the Hollins Distemper. The contents of this notebook, though fragmentary and damaged by damp, contain entries extending beyond the date previously believed to mark Green's disappearance. One entry, dated November 12, 1781, reads, "I have not departed as intended. There are matters unfinished. The child is not as before. She knows my thoughts before I speak them. Her countenance is no longer her own." Another, dated December 3, states, "The nights are unbroken by sleep. When I close my eyes, I hear the sound of her breathing in the room though she is kept outside. I fear that part of me listens for her willingly." Later passages grow increasingly disordered. A line dated December 17 reads, "It is not the child that speaks now but something that remembers through her. I have begun to hear my own voice repeated in her mouth." The final legible note, likely from January of 1782, consists of a single sentence, "To bind her is to bind the self that watches." The discovery of these papers renewed interest in the matter. Reverend Parr, though skeptical, forwarded copies to the diocesan office. A reply dated September 30, 1787, advised the immediate sealing of the property and the interment of any remains that may be found. The county magistrate authorized an inspection under the supervision of Sheriff Miles. The record of that expedition, entered into the county proceedings of October 1787, remains one of the more detailed official documents relating to the case. It states that the sheriff, accompanied by 2 deputies and 1 parish clerk, entered the Hollands property on October 12 and conducted a room-by-room survey. In the kitchen, they found traces of fire upon the hearth but no fuel or tinder. In the loft above, the straw mat was still intact, though reduced to a darkened husk. On the inside wall of the smokehouse, according to the clerk's report, were marks resembling letters or symbols made in soot or burnt grease, indecipherable. The most remarkable finding, recorded under oath, was made at the well. Sheriff Miles testified, "We found the stones about the well disturbed and the surface newly turned. Upon digging to the depth of 4 feet, we uncovered a wooden box, much decayed, containing the bones of a small child. The bones were said to be dry and unbroken, wrapped in a strip of linen cloth. No sign of clothing or ornament was found. The sheriff ordered the remains interred in the parish ground under a simple wooden marker bearing no name." The accompanying note in the record adds, "said to be the body of the servant child Rebecca, deceased." For a time afterward, the matter appeared closed. The parish ceased to receive complaints from neighboring properties, and the Hollands tract was formally declared forfeited to the county. However, a year later, in November 1788, the sexton reported repeated disturbances near the burial plot. His written complaint to Reverend Parr reads, "The soil is often turned by morning as if from beneath. No animals have been seen about it. The ground sinks a little each day." The sexton, one John Willett, was described as sober and reliable. Parr himself examined the site on November 14 and noted, "soil soft, depressed by 3 inches, as if recently dug." The next entry in his diary, dated November 20, is longer and exhibits an uncharacteristic tone of restraint. "I stood by the grave at dusk and perceived the earth trembling faintly, though no wind was present. The air around the marker had a bitterness to it, like burnt sugar. I recited the burial office and withdrew." In December of that year, Willett disappeared. His tools were found near the churchyard fence. A search revealed nothing, though tracks led toward the road in the direction of the old Hollands tract. A notation in the parish register reads simply, "Willett missing, presumed drowned." Subsequent events were drawn largely from recollections of townspeople years later. A woman named Ruth Carter, then aged 12, later testified in 1802 that on the night Willett vanished she had woken to see a small figure standing outside our window, all white in the face, and it watched us until morning. She claimed her father forbade her ever to mention it. By 1790, the Hollands name had vanished from local records except for occasional tax notations. The house itself was gone by that time, reportedly consumed by fire during a thunderstorm. A brief notice in the Virginia Gazette dated August 11, 1790, reads, "A structure long uninhabited in Raven County, known locally as the Hollands House, was struck by lightning and burned to ashes. No occupants known." The site was thereafter referred to by residents simply as the Hollow. For nearly 20 years thereafter, the story remained dormant. Yet in 1809, following the reorganization of parish boundaries, Reverend Edward Lorne took possession of the Raven Parish Rectory and began a general survey of old records. Among the bundles preserved in a sealed cabinet, he found the remainder of Reverend Green's writings together with several unsigned pages in a different hand. These contained sketches of the house and well, accompanied by phrases such as mirror surface and line of return. The handwriting was identified by comparison as belonging to Dr. Pike, who had disappeared in 1786. Lorne's interest in the case grew into a full inquiry. His surviving manuscript, Notes upon the Hollands Phenomenon, now in private collection, attempts to collate all earlier references. He wrote, "It appears the girl Rebecca Hollands, or called so, was not recorded as born in the parish though listed in the household accounts. Her absence from baptismal rolls suggests either negligence or concealment. The coincidence of multiple disappearances around her person cannot be ignored." In July 1810, Lorne visited the former site of the Hollands property, accompanied by 2 parish stewards. He described the well as half filled with debris and rainwater. "The stones are blackened," he wrote, "though no fire seems to have touched them." In the surrounding ground, he observed the growth of dark moss forming distinct circular patterns, as if scorched. His record of that day ends with the phrase, "a sound beneath, like breath in stone." Upon returning, Lorne began to experience what he termed auditory visitations. In a private letter to a colleague in Fredericksburg, dated August 3, 1810, he confessed, "Each night, as I compose my notes, I hear a voice of a child reciting lines from Scripture I have not yet read aloud. At times, I answer without meaning to." He attempted to dismiss the episodes as fatigue, though his handwriting grew unsteady in later entries. The last coherent portion of his manuscript is dated September 10, 1810, "The sound is clearer now. It says my name in the old manner, as I imagine Reverend Green must have heard his. The voice is not the child's alone, it carries another beneath, as if layered. When I pray, the sound moves closer." No further writings from Lorne exist after that date. Parish records indicate that he drowned in the North Anna River later that autumn. In 1811, his successor, Reverend Samuel Treadwell, found the rectory in disarray and the cabinet of papers sealed with wax. He remarked in his annual report that "the place is burdened with an air of heaviness uncommon in dwellings of this age." Treadwell did not pursue the Hollands matter, though he retained the sealed documents and placed them in the church vestry, where they remained until the early 1820s. It was then, during a period of road expansion through the former Hollands lands, that workmen unearthed a series of irregular pits near the old well site. A county surveyor's account, dated March 1822, records 3 depressions found at even intervals, each containing remains of small animals, mostly birds, arranged symmetrically. Bones unbroken, placed with wings folded. The surveyor, identified as Jonathan Keene, noted also that, beneath the lowest layer lay fragments of cloth resembling a child's garment. The fabric, described as coarse linen discolored by age, was collected and deposited with the county clerk. Its current whereabouts are unknown. Following these discoveries, the workers refused to continue, claiming to hear a child's humming near the edge of the clearing at dusk. Keene's assistant, Thomas Avery, later swore in affidavit, "It was like a nursery song but without tune. When we stopped, it stopped." The project was halted for 2 weeks until a substitute crew from another district was brought in. Meanwhile, Treadwell received a letter from the diocesan office requesting clarification about the recurring legends attached to the Hollands Tract, which by then had become a subject of curiosity among local natural philosophers. His reply, dated May 12, 1822, adopts the same dry formality that characterized earlier correspondences. "I can only attest to what records remain. There was once a child named Rebecca, enslaved to Elias Hollands, deceased. Beyond that, there is silence except for the tales of the ignorant." Nevertheless, he appended one striking observation: "On the night of the last full moon, the church bell rang twice without wind, though the rope was secured." From that year forward, no further official mention of the Hollands property appears in county or parish documentation. The area gradually reverted to woodland. Yet oral accounts persisted. An elderly man named Caleb Rhine, who claimed to have been a child laborer on the road project, later recounted to his grandson in 1849 that there was something buried there that wasn't meant to be disturbed. "We saw a girl's shadow where no girl stood." His recollection, though given decades later, aligns with earlier details preserved in parish lore. Even so, the surviving documents, letters, memoranda, case notes, and diary fragments, retain a remarkable consistency in one aspect: the recurring presence of the child described as silent, with pale eyes and unmoving hands, always near the well or by the hearth, and the accompanying phenomena of sound without source, speech without breath, and reflection without image. By the middle of the 1820s, the Hollands Tract had fallen entirely from local maps, its name replaced with a simple mark indicating unimproved woodland. Yet certain accounts persisted among those who lived along the Raven Road or worked in the surrounding fields. The few remaining parishioners of the old district recalled that, even after decades of abandonment, the air in that part of the valley carried a taste of iron, particularly after rain. Shepherds claimed their flocks refused to graze near the line of old fence posts, and hunters told of hearing faint, even footsteps pacing along the hollows when none walked there. The last verifiable inspection of the site took place in September 1824, when the county sent a small team to assess timber quality. Their report, contained in the Raven County Surveyor's Docket, Volume 4, describes the land as uneven, yielding poor growth of pine and cypress, with remnants of stone foundation visible near the northern edge. The foreman, Samuel Blake, appended an informal note to the clerk's transcript: "An unaccountable chill pervades the ground there. My men complained of dizziness and one vomited. We found no wildlife." In that same year, a local schoolmaster named Henry Leake, recently arrived from Norfolk, undertook a personal investigation of what he termed the Hollands phenomenon. Leake's letters to his friend, the antiquarian James Ray, now preserved in the Ray collection at Richmond, comprise the last extensive primary source connected to the case. They reveal an educated man's attempt to rationalize a body of folklore through observation and comparison. In his first letter, dated October 2, 1824, Leake wrote, "I have taken lodging in Raven Parish, near the site long reputed haunted. My intention is not to chase phantoms but to trace the lineage of this local myth to some natural or moral cause. I find it curious that so many of these tales center upon a single child whose historical record is fragmentary yet whose image persists as though alive. Over the following weeks, Leake collected accounts from older residents. 1. A woman named Dorcas Hinn stated that her mother had known the Reverend who lost his mind, and that he heard the little girl under the floor. Another, the blacksmith Joseph Rudd, recalled hearing as a boy a sound like a stick dragging across slate whenever he passed the Hollands Road. Leake recorded each testimony verbatim, appending his own observations with caution. He wrote, "There is no consistency in the details, yet all mention the same quality of stillness preceding the sound, as if the air itself were arrested." In a later letter, dated November 10, Leake described his first visit to the site. The path, he noted, had nearly vanished beneath undergrowth, but remnants of the foundation stones were visible through the weeds. The well remained intact, though partially filled with rainwater and leaves. He measured its depth by line at approximately 12 feet before the rope met obstruction. "The water," he wrote, "is black but odorless. The reflection shows the sky without distortion, though I could not see my own face." Leake's notes from that evening mention a temperature drop of several degrees at sunset, and that his compass needle trembled in constant oscillation. He camped near the road rather than remain on the grounds overnight. In his notebook he wrote a single phrase in the margin, "A pulse beneath the soil." His next visit, recorded November 14, was made in daylight, accompanied by a local boy, Thomas Gray, aged 14. Together they explored the area surrounding the old foundation. Leake observed that the moss-covered stones formed a rough rectangle measuring 30 by 20 feet, corresponding to the likely dimensions of a two-room dwelling. Near the eastern corner, he uncovered what appeared to be fragments of iron, possibly hinges or tools, corroded beyond recognition. The boy, meanwhile, discovered a small wooden peg, blackened and brittle, embedded in the earth. Leake placed it in his satchel for later examination. That evening, after returning to his lodgings, he noted an unusual odor from the object, not of decay, but of damp ashes. He left it upon the windowsill overnight. His entry for the following morning states, "The peg is gone. The sill bears no mark of disturbance, nor is the latch moved. Only a faint smear, as of soot, remains." The remaining letters span the next 2 months. In one dated December 2, Leake confides, "The boy Gray has fallen ill since our last excursion. His father says he mumbles at night and points toward the wood. I am told he speaks the same phrase repeatedly, 'She is waiting to be called.'" Leake's tone remains analytical. He attributes the child's condition to infection of imagination by fear. Still, he resolves to suspend further visits until the boy recovers. In his final letter, January 4, 1825, Leake recounts an event that took place 3 nights earlier. "There came a knocking upon my door after midnight. When I opened it, no person stood without, yet upon the threshold lay the same blackened peg I had lost, clean of soot and dry as new wood. The air was still. I heard, or thought I heard, the faintest sound as of a child breathing close by. It ceased when I spoke." He concludes, "I intend to present my findings in Richmond come spring, though I begin to feel that what lies beneath these tales is neither spirit nor sickness but something in the earth itself, some memory that mimics the living." Leake never made his journey to Richmond. Parish records from April 1825 note his death by self-administered laudanum in a state of nervous fever. Among his effects were found the letters quoted above and several pages of notes written in a disjointed manner, repeating one sentence: "She is not gone." After Leake's death, the county authorities ordered the well on the former Hollands tract filled and sealed with stone. The task was carried out under supervision of the surveyor Keene, now an older man. His brief report, dated May 17, 1825, states, "The well filled to ground level with soil and rubble." While at work, a chill wind rose from the opening though the day was calm. The sound resembled a sigh, prolonged. The men refused further labor after that, and Keene certified the site closed for all practical purposes. Over the subsequent years, the case vanished once more from written record, surviving only in passing local reference. But by the late 1820s, renewed construction in the area, particularly the clearing of timber along the road to North Anna, brought the name Hollands again into circulation. Workers unearthed fragments of old pottery and a rusted chain near the former boundary line, which they sold to itinerant collectors. One such collector, identified as a Mr. Latham of Petersburg, later included these artifacts in a traveling exhibition under the title Relics of the Haunted Plantation. A surviving handbill from 1828 advertises "The Accursed Wood of the Hollands Child" among its curiosities. The same year, a brief report appeared in the Richmond Chronicle, attributed to an anonymous correspondent from Raven County. It read in part, "There are whispers again of strange appearances near the old Hollands land. A farmer named Clancy states that his youngest heard singing at twilight, a hymn in a tongue not known. Others dismiss it, but few will pass that road after dark." The newspaper treated it as a curiosity, though the phrasing closely mirrors earlier accounts from the 18th century. From this period onward, the record becomes sparse. The last known document referring to the Hollands case within its proper historical frame is a letter dated October 1830, addressed to the diocesan office from Reverend Treadwell's successor, the young clergyman Charles Havers. His language is cautious, betraying awareness of the story's reputation. "Certain of the parishioners have spoken to me of the child said to have lived here half a century past. They claim to hear her name called by the wind, though I take this for fancy. Yet there is one matter I cannot explain. Each night at the close of service, the church bell emits a single tone of its own accord, and the rope sways as if drawn from within." Havers enclosed with his letter a small folded note, unsigned, left at the church door the previous week. The handwriting, uneven and faint, read, "She does not sleep beneath the stone. The well remembers." No trace of the writer was found. After 1830, the surviving trail of the Hollands affair ends within the boundaries set by the century. The documents, letters, ledgers, diaries, collectively span nearly 50 years and multiple custodians, yet all converge upon the same core image, a child, silent and pale, associated with a sequence of deaths, disappearances, and disturbances. No conclusive evidence establishes her survival beyond the initial decade, yet no burial or baptismal record confirms her ordinary death. Modern readers of these documents, though cautioned against inference, have noted the pattern of replication among witnesses, the echoing of words, the reflection that fails to return, the recurrence of sound preceding absence. Each observer, whether clergyman, physician, or scholar, recorded the same sequence of impressions without apparent knowledge of their predecessors. It is not known whether this congruence reflects contagion of rumor, shared hallucination, or the persistence of some external agency upon the human faculties. The few objects verifiably connected to the case, Green's surviving notebook, fragments of Pike's sketches, the coroner's ledger from 1781, and Leake's final letters, show signs of exposure to damp but remain legible. Examination of the paper reveals faint discoloration along the lower edges, described in archival notes as grayish film resembling soot, odor of stone. None of the documents display overt fabrication. Their consistency of detail, spanning half a century, is remarkable but not explicable by known communication among the recorders. The geographical records of Raven County show that by 1832, the Hollands tract had been absorbed into adjacent properties, the name erased from taxation rolls. A stream now passes through the site where the well once stood, its course altered by spring floods. Locals of the later 19th century, when questioned by travelers or surveyors, referred to the area simply as the Hollow, avoiding the older surname. It is said that the ground there remains soft, even in drought, and that no vegetation higher than moss will take root. What remains certain is that within a narrow span of Virginia's history, between the years 1781 and 1830, numerous individuals of sound reputation recorded incidents centered upon the same locus and the same spectral identity. The parish authorities treated the matter first as moral corruption, then as madness, later as mere superstition. Each conclusion failed to close the record. The case, such as it is, ends without resolution, its chronology preserved but its cause unassigned. If one were to distill the available evidence into its simplest form, it would appear thus: a child of uncertain birth, confined and isolated amid an atmosphere of fear and disease, a succession of deaths following her presence, a well serving as both physical and symbolic center of recurrence, and an enduring pattern of mimicry, voices repeated, gestures mirrored, reflections absent. Beyond these constants, all else is conjecture. It has been proposed, though never proven, that some geological feature of the region, perhaps mineral emissions from the soil or subterranean water, might have produced sensations of cold, vibration, or faint sound capable of deceiving witnesses. Others have suggested the possibility of suggestion itself, the power of inherited memory transmitted through local tradition until it took on substance in the perception of those predisposed to expect it. Yet neither theory accounts for the precision with which separated observers described the same phenomena across decades. The record ends not with revelation but with silence. Reverend Havers's final report to the diocese, dated December 20, 1830, closes with these lines: "I have performed the customary services and found the parish in tolerable order. The bells ring true, the grounds kept, and the air of the valley serene. Yet in the hour before dawn, when mist lies low upon the fields, I perceive a faint murmur near the churchyard wall, like words spoken through water. It ceases when approached. I have made no mention of this to my congregation." His successor, appointed in the spring of 1831, recorded nothing of the kind. No later account corroborates or refutes Havers's final note. The Hollands tract passed into obscurity, and with it the records of its inhabitants. What remains are fragments, clerical notations, witness statements, medical observations, each composed in the measured hand of a different generation, each concluding with the same absence of conclusion. The story that began with a child's silence ended, fittingly, in the silence of the record itself. The final document bearing the name appears in the Raven Parish Index of Disused Graves, compiled circa 1835, though likely drawn from earlier sources. The entry reads, "Unnamed female, believed to be of the Hollins household. Interred without service. Site uncertain. No surviving kin. No cross marks the location. The soil above it, if indeed it still corresponds to any single burial, has long since shifted with the passing of years and floods. What occurred upon that ground between 1781 and 1830 cannot now be established. The materials that survive speak plainly in their tone yet obscurely in their meaning. Taken together, they form not a narrative of cause and effect but a pattern of recurrence, like the reflection of a sound that persists after its source has vanished. And so the matter concludes as the documents themselves conclude, without verdict, without confession, without witness living to attest. The house is gone, the well filled, the parish dissolved into newer boundaries. Only the name remains, faint upon the margins of forgotten ledgers, Rebecca Hollins. Whether she lived, died, or remained in some condition between, the records neither affirm nor deny. They only repeat, in handwriting that differs but phrasing that does not. She was seen near the well. She did not speak. The air was very still. End of record.